Sometimes when we begin to question our faith or have doubts about our tradition, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert. When we take a step back and honestly evaluate organized religion in the 21st century, many times it doesn't make any sense. The more we cling to it and try to save it, the worse it becomes. In addition, widespread abuse, cover-ups, and victim shaming cause some of us to question whether it will ever be right again.
The Desert Sanctuary was created by Carl and Laura Forehand. It consists of a podcast, a blog, along with Carl and Laura's writing.
We're happy you're here. Welcome to the show. Hi, welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I feel like we've said that a lot this weekend because we've done a lot of podcasts, which is super exciting. And we have another wonderful podcast that we're recording right now. And I'm excited to dive into it. Before we do, is there anything you want to share with the listeners before we get started?
Yeah, I think just sometimes I feel like it's not good to make announcements in podcasts because you don't know when someone's going to listen to that. But we are going to start talking next month. We're talking about church harm and trauma and things like that this week. But also next month, we're going to talk about things we don't understand.
So meaning like February, March?
Yeah. So later February, mid-February, March. And on into the next month.
Right.
So those would be things that we don't understand because we've opened up. We're thinking about other things and listening and trying to understand. So it'd be things we don't understand, kind of like Zoolander, the school for people that don't know stuff or whatever you said. It's a real long title, like things that we don't understand and we're trying to understand better.
Really understand better.
Something like that.
Yeah. So
we are struggling to understand our world. And so we're going to invite some people on that, like, I just read a book about a post-Christian book, and I want to understand, what does that mean? And so in trying to understand it, we'll have the author come on, things like that. So that's as much of a promotion as I can do. And I think I'm losing my voice also.
Too many podcasts,
but
maybe.
Today we're here to talk to Susan, right?
Susan Cottrell. She is an international speaker whose TEDx talk for a crowd of 5,000 at TEDx Mile High in Denver has 1.6 million online views. OutSmart calls her the Mother of All MamaBears. The Advocate dubs her our favorite affirming matriarch. She is a prominent voice for the LGBTQ plus community and their faith parents, allies, and others who are marginalized and in the midst of deconstructing from harmful, false religious teachings. She has been featured on ABC's 2020, Nightline, and Good Morning America, on NBC News Out, and as a contributor on the Our Bible app. She is a public theologian, and through her nonprofit organization, FreedHearts.org, Susan challenges people to love as the foundation of their faith. She spent 20 plus years in the non-affirming Evangelical church, had a Master's of Arts in Theological Studies, and served as the Vice-President of, I want to get this right, PFLAG or PFLAG.
PFLAG.
PFLAG, thank you. Her Free Hearts blog and YouTube videos have millions of viewers. Targeted Freed Hearts podcast is heard in nearly 150 countries. And her books, Mom, I'm Gay, Loving Your LGBTQ Child and Strengthening Your Faith, True Colors, Celebrating the Truth and Beauty of the Real You, Radically Included, the Biblical Case for Radical Love and Inclusion, and Be the Love You Want to See in the World are critically acclaimed. She and her husband, Rob, have been married for 36 years and have 5 children, 2 of whom identify as queer, as well as 1 grandchild and another on the way. Welcome to the podcast, Susan.
Thank you so much.
Exciting bio. I had no idea were on 2020 and Nightline and all those things I've watched, but I had no idea you were on those things. So wonderful.
Yeah, well,
the
Desert Sanctuary.
Carl's about to knock over the light, trying to get the light on, but we're happy to have you here.
Thank you. I have to add that second grandchild that was on the way is here now, so it's 2 grandchildren. Yeah,
that's exciting.
So, yeah,
exciting.
We had children, obviously it rocked our world, but when we had grandchildren, it blew Laura away. And she was. It
really caused me to just rethink everything. I mean,
yes,
the whole, we're sinful at the core and all that. When I had children, it was like, well, I couldn't really buy that for my kids. I couldn't just look at them and go, "You're a filthy, rotten rag." There's no good in you. Yeah. And then, when I had grandchildren, it was like a serious, total transformation. It just, I can't explain it. I mean, I talk about it in our book and I've shared it on podcasts and things like that, but it was a complete transformation in just how I view that part of evangelical Christianity. So,
it's so dangerous, that theology that we're sinful and rotten to the core.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Susan, we want to hear your story, and we think of stories as sacred things that people share with us, and we take it as an honor and a privilege that you would share it with us. And so we want to treat it with respect and share however much you want to share with us. Mm-hmm. Our job is to listen and believe you. And so,
thank you.
But you do that however you want to do it.
Sure. And I want to say that if there's anything you want to ask another question about, feel free. It's perfectly fine. So,
great.
Yeah, well, we were in the evangelical church, my husband and I. We did not grow up in it, but when we started having kids, we raised them there. We were there 20 years. We were, Bible leaders, Sunday school teachers, whatever. I led women's retreats. Rob led worship, all those things that you do. We were model citizens, in quotes. And then, some things, the wheels began to fall off the bus a little bit. And we started to see that, when you really have trouble, they're not there for you. Carl, I think you heard you reference that the pastor or other Christians will just say, well, pray and read the Bible and come to church more. Just there's your answer. Bob's your uncle. And how that didn't work. And he'd begun to see that. But then our child came out. Mm-hmm. And the answer I got from my friends, now these are the closest women friends in the church I'd been in for 3 years at that point, since we'd moved there. And they were like, well, it's a sin and you can't accept it. These separate women, I thought, where's the handbook you're reading from? Because what do you mean? It's my daughter, not a sin. And how do I not accept her? That's insanity. So this child's a gift from God until they're gay. Mm-hmm. And now they're not. So give the gift back. Yeah. Sorry, God, I don't want it. Mm-hmm. That just made zero sense. Oh, and so one child came out and a year later, the other child came out. So it was like 2 out of 5. So, and I was like, you guys are out of your mind. I knew that we could not ascribe not just to that tenet of the faith, but the entire thing they were selling in the evangelical church now was all falling apart. And we looked around they were hurting us. They were hurting our daughters vicariously. And we knew there were a lot of other people that were in a similar boat that wouldn't have the wherewithal to defend their kids like we were. And so we started reaching out to the LGBTQ community, to families, and it just snowballed because there's, people came out of the woodwork for support because they were dying literally from these church teachings. Yeah. And suicide and depression and self-hatred, and parents too. Everything they thought now was in jeopardy. Mm-hmm. So we started FreedHearts, and we started just creating content for people and groups for people. And we have never looked back. We have deconstructed down to the foundations, down to the ground. Mm-hmm. And it is more freeing. And I always say that I look and smell and act more like Jesus now than I ever did when I was in the church. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you say the same thing.
I have said that same thing. I feel like outside of the walls of the church, there's so much more freedom to love groups you were told not to love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there is so much more freedom. I agree with you.
Yeah. And once that box begins to collapse around LGBTQ, then the whole box of racism, of misogyny, all the other boxes start to collapse. Yes. And, Rob always says, we broke the box we had God in, and all heaven broke loose. And it's true, all heaven broke loose. And oh my gosh, I'm so grateful now. I'm just so grateful for all the things we endured. But for people who are young or who are more alone and don't have we were in our 50s when this started. And so, we had a lot of wherewithal. But when you're in that position where you have nobody, or you're stuck going to church every week with your family, those are the people we really help and reach out to, because it's so painful and damaging. Mm-hmm. It's so painful. Yes. Yeah, that was the skimmed view of the story.
Yeah.
So
then you went on and you did a TED Talk.
I was going to say.
And,
yes.
I told Laura when we were talking about it, then we put it up on the screen, and she looked first like she was a little nervous. It was kind of like Brene Brown sharing about vulnerability, and it seemed like it was all from the heart.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And it was very vulnerable, I'm sure, for you. Mm-hmm. But what a great thing to do. The TED Talk's titled, I had to choose between my daughter in the church or the Evangelical, something like that.
Yeah.
It's really powerful.
Yeah. Radio. Yeah.
Thank you. And if anybody looks for that, it's on the website. You can just easily at freedhearts.org find everything that we do. But the TED Talk is on there. And I encourage people to watch it, because it really does speak to the heart, But
it does.
I feel like you're probably just about to say this, but I get in arguments with people because they say, want to talk about charm and trauma and things like that. And people will say to me, I've never seen trauma in the church. Mm-hmm. You're probably the one that's caused it. But
exactly.
Talk about how we're harmed by the church. You have, a specific incident where you were hurt deeply. Mm-hmm. But why is it, in your opinion, that the church causes trauma? And, maybe you don't agree with that, but.
Oh, no, I totally agree that they cause trauma, because they are an institution. They're run like an institution. They're a for-profit business. Mm-hmm. And, if you pick your conglomerate online, Amazon or whoever, put them in charge of providing for people's needs, it will come at a cost. Because there's a conflict of interest. And when you have a church with a conflict of interest between, maintaining their building and their salary and their everything, that's what's their bottom line. People are expendable in their machine. Mm-hmm. Whereas for Jesus, the machine was expendable. It's people that matter. Any grandmother, as you said, or grandparent can tell you that. It's people that matter, not the machinery. But you can't serve, God and people and the machinery of capitalism. You can't do both at once. You have to choose one or over the other. That's what Jesus was saying with that. You can't serve God and mammon. And so, yeah, they're harming because they're at the top of the food chain. You know, the king doesn't worry about people who don't have any scraps to eat, even, because he's never hungry.
Wow.
Is that?
Yeah. We often say the organization comes first,
Right?
Because the organization comes, sometimes those needs are overlooked. And I also see a lot that I don't think any pastor or any church starts with the intention of hurting people, but wounded people hobble into that place,
Right?
And it is an organization, like you say, and those needs get overlooked. People,
talk
not even about the issues,
and they're not even visible. Like, they can't even conceive of there being needs. Like, white people in this country can't, by and large, conceive of what a Black person endures every day. They just can't. And men, even the best men, don't know what it is to be a woman. And that's where empathy is meant to come from. And the church was meant to engender empathy. And instead it's engendering, hatred and competition and rejection. When this kind of first started, and the kids were first out, and we were already kind of getting the rejection from the church, I went to this gathering of women, like this fair where you show what your ministry is, whatever. And I was there to observe. And the woman was speaking about, do whatever God tells you to do, no matter how surprising, no matter how unexpected or hard for you, do what God calls you to do. And God said to me at that moment, and I do hear God's voice, and it does not sound like, the pastor's voice.
Right.
I did hear God's voice saying, you're going to serve the gay community. That was the word I had really at the moment. And I was like, what? You're going to serve the gay community? I thought, but I'm going to lose all my friends. Which I look back now, I don't have one of those friends and don't miss them because, everything's changed. But God just said, you're going to serve this community. And so during the break, I talked to the woman who had spoken, who had made this clarion call, because I'm always moved when I hear a message like that. And so I told her that God told me I would be serving the gay community. And that got her attention because she wasn't really listening until that moment. And then she said, you mean to help them not be gay?
Oh, boy.
And I was like, no, that's not what I mean. And like in my mind, my arms kind of went out to each side to protect these people that I didn't even know yet, besides my daughters, and protect them from people like her, from mindset like her, who mean well. She means well. She's been taught that being gay is a sin. It's not. Jerry Falwell invented it as in the 70s, in the moral majority, because it's a great divider. It's a great way to make a lot of money for the church. But so people just follow in line. And then of course, the Bible NASB added the word homosexuality to it, to that word you're not supposed to add or subtract from, it says, but they added this word because it was expedient for them. And so I know I've kind of like gone around a lot of circles here, I think, but in talking about this, but I think people definitely go into the ministry, into volunteering, into all these things wholehearted. A lot of people really want to do good, and it's what they know, but they're trying to fit a square theology, in a round hole of people that need to be loved and accepted as they are. It's fundamentally incompatible.
Yeah, it's so good. So talk a little bit more about what specifically you guys do at FreedHearts, the kind of different things that where that kind of branches out, and how it helps other people.
Yeah, well, so I started with the blog, and I knew that if I could just begin to coalesce these ideas that were counter to what the church was saying, they would hold together. And so I started writing this blog, and it really took off because people are hungry for this. And people would reach out to me and say, my daughter came out and I don't know what to do, or somebody would say, I came out to my mom and now she won't stop crying. And just all of these heart-rending stories I feel like I'm committing suicide or whatever, were just heartbreaking. But that grew and grew and grew. And then I wrote Mom, I'm Gay. It just sort of easily came out from the pain I'd observed from people. And then the other books I wrote, and now we're doing a podcast, which we love. And it's going so well.
Yeah.
I think it's it is in the top 5% measured by downloads of podcasts. So
awesome.
We're just so happy because you can say so much in a podcast. Like you can cover a lot of ground. Where writing is a lot of tedium. There's a lot of writing as takes, which I love to write, but a podcast is just very fun. And we have a whole YouTube channel full of YouTube videos I've done about hell, deconstructing hell, various topics that, I thought might lose a portion of my audience. I'm sure has, but it's gained a lot of other people. And I'd rather go with the person who's hurting and support them. I'd rather afflict the comfortable and comfort the afflicted than comfort the comfortable and afflict the afflicted.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
So what is your with the podcast? I'm going to check it out, by the way. But I mean, what is your with, like, is it to educate people? Is it to help us become better advocates, allies? What is your hope with?
All of the above. It's really all of the above. We help give voice to the community in podcasts they can share with their dad or their mother. We help give voice to parents. We help them. We resonate with where we know they are, like where the people we hear from, the things they tell us. We put voice to that. We're doing one on pronouns. We're just about to record it today on pronouns and why that matters, and being transgender. So we kind of cover the whole gamut, but our focus is on respecting and loving each other. And love means to accept someone as they are, with room for who they may become. It doesn't mean you hold a standard for them, because who am I to hold a standard for you? I don't know what the standard is for you. I don't know what's best for you. And how arrogant to think that somebody could do that. So we really love people where they are. Where our heart is when I was speaking at a church in a very small conservative town. A very conservative church, and they'd never had somebody like me speak. And the pastor was there, and I'd been invited and gave the evening. It was wonderful. So much just love and hugs and relief at the end from everybody. It was a big success. And afterward, we all the volunteers and the pastor and I and the coordinators went to dinner and like a debrief. And the pastor was sitting across from me. He had been there the whole time. He'd invited me, or been forced to invite me. I don't know. But he said, I was uncomfortable when you were talking because I felt like I was being singled out. And I didn't really have the words. I said, oh, wow. I probably said, that must have been difficult or something. I don't know. But I didn't exactly have the words, and the conversation kind of resumed, but I was thinking about it because outliers. And as not being a straight white male, I am that, where you automatically think, well, what could I do differently? What did I do? You know, the top people don't do that, the power people. But anyway, that's what I was thinking. But then the woman next to me, a young woman, 20 maybe, whispered to me in the softest voice. She said, "This is the first time I've been in any church setting where I have felt safe, where I felt comfortable. Thank you for speaking." And I just, tears came to my eyes, and I hugged her, because and it was like a little gift from heaven saying, this is why you do this work. That pastor's uncomfortable. Of course he's uncomfortable. He's, you know, you're telling him to stop beating people up. But this gal to be comfortable, that's the name of the game. So that's what we do, is we make the comfortable uncomfortable, and we comfort those who've been left out. Yeah.
So this is something I sometimes is, for me, words are real important, and words begin to emerge. You know, I have a friend that's a mystic, and she can spend an hour talking about 2 words, you know, because the words become more and more important. So as just a discussion point, and you could say, well, that word's important, and that may be all you have to say about it. But let me throw some words out that kind of are emerging for me, and you comment on what it means to you, and then Laura may have a question to ask. And our best conversations are when Laura asks all the questions.
I love Laura's input too.
She's good. She's good. So the first word is listening. And when that came up for me, is when I posted this one day, I said, maybe instead of listening to so many sermons, we should have been listening to each other. And that's where my heart's at. What do you think about listening?
I love listening. I've got this brand new baby grandchild, you know, and just, I was holding them. They're like days old. And I was holding them and just listening to the little tiniest coos, and just like, oh my gosh. And I think if you're busy slamming around, making sure their diapers changed, making sure whatever, dishes are clean, you don't hear that. And it just deeply moved me how listening, pausing long enough to listen, is what it's all about. And how can you hear somebody that's on the that's been shoved out of community, if you're not listening for that faint voice of who's been shuffled out, if you're listening to the same privileged voice from the top. As I love that word, listening, as something to deconstruct.
So would you say, like, in your whole journey, you know, learning more and affirming, being an ally, advocate for LGBTQ, that listening, I mean, is that the first step we need to take in learning? You know what I'm saying? Like, someone who wants to be more of an advocate or an ally, is listening kind of the first step? And I would even say non-judgmental. Like, I feel like I go in it, like, really not ready to defend your point of view, but really listening.
So stopping your own conversation and just putting a pause in it, leaving it at the door. I like to think of it as going into someone's interior, like they've invited you into their living room of their heart, and you want to go in, you want to leave your crap at the door, and go in and sit gently on the sofa. And if they offer you tea, take it, and don't comment about how you would rearrange things, or isn't this chair so old, you know, and this doesn't match this. That's none of your business. And just instead to listen and take what they have to offer. That's how we are safe human beings for each other. And that is darn scarce. And
it's almost like go ahead.
No.
Finish your thought.
If you're very fortunate, by the end of it, you'll be hugging and saying, let's do this again. And they will feel better when you leave than before you came. And you'll feel better too. And that's connection. And that's where listening really happens, is I'm not committed to changing you. God, to go in with an agenda. I have relatives that are 25 years old that are saying to me, oh, I'm praying for you. I'm like, keep it. Okay, I don't say that, but what are you praying? That I'll come to know Jesus the way you do? No, been there, rejected that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Laura.
That was one of the things we had done a podcast with a Benedictine sister, and that was one of the things she said is that they learn is about heart, like listening from the heart.
Yes.
And I love what you said about that is the way we make connections with people.
Yes.
Right. And, deep down, that's what we all are hardwired for, is we want to make connections. But you're right. We cannot make these connections if we go in with our own agenda.
Right.
We have to. So I love that that was kind of the first step. Someone like, me, who's deconstructing everything and, had previous preconceived notions through the church, church teachings of certain groups of people, I want those to be changed in myself. And so that's great to know that the first thing I need to do is make that heart connection with them by, listening out my own agenda. That's wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah.
We took that word listening pretty far, didn't we?
Yeah.
We did.
Good,
The reason we were talking to that sister was because she was a part of a spiritual direction course that I went through.
Mm-hmm.
She was my spiritual director for a while. And she, when I would share things with her, I would say, part of me feels sad or something like that. And she would say, so a part of you feels sad. Mm-hmm. And me as an ex-evangelical, when someone tells me that, I'm already thinking about how to fix them or how to, what my advice is for them. And she hardly ever gave me advice, but she listened, and then I could find the wisdom within, however you want to describe that. And so it was very, very, very helpful. Mm-hmm. And I am losing my voice after the 5th podcast. Another word is compassion. What do you think about the word?
Yes. That's another thing that is we could use so much more of it. But I hear it as with passion for another person who's telling you their story. And if you can't resonate in some way, then you need to listen more, and hear and put yourself there and say, how would I feel? Think of actors like, I don't know, Meryl Streep or any of them that I love, who say you've got to find some way to like the character that you're playing, some way to resonate with them, or you can't play them well. Mm-hmm. Even somebody you wouldn't think is a great person. And I think to connect with someone in a way that you could see yourself in their position. That's just in their circumstances. I don't mean this is what I would do if I were you. I don't mean that. I mean, where you can resonate with where they're coming from. That is really empowering to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love it when somebody really understands what I'm trying to say and why I would do a thing I did or say a thing I said, Yeah. So, yeah. Sign me up on compassion. I think that's a great thing.
Yeah. And we
definitely need more of it for sure.
Yeah. We learned a lot about judgment. And even when we go inside, we'll do inner child work or something like that.
Yes.
To have compassion for that child.
That's great.
Laura's a second grade teacher. And so a lot of times we've talked about, if I'm dealing with that part of me that's wounded, to have compassion for it, just like I would a child in her classroom, right?
Yes.
But also to have compassion for that part of me that's kind of judgy and we call it a critic or whatever, that's trying to protect me, and what I'm working on, I guess, is passion for the people that have hurt me and trying to find where that balance is, to still find a place for that.
Yeah, I mean, like every bully on the playground, when you scratch the surface, you find they have a terrible dad situation or something. They're hurt.
Right.
And you can't then say, oh, okay, and let them still bully. There's a balance there of stopping them from hurting others. But yeah, having deep compassion. I do. I talk to my closest relative on, that no longer likes us because of what we do. And I think, gosh, she got here honestly from our childhood growing up and what she internalized, and then how she's made God into this thing that you just don't anger. She would never say that, but God's wonderful and takes you just as you are, and blah, blah, but don't piss him off.
Yeah.
Because he'll hurt you. And I think that's a really common thing, because after all, God's God, and we're just, lucky to even be here. And so, to have compassion, I forgot how that connected with compassion. Oh, to have compassion that is what she and so many have internalized of us, me too, in the day that, it's a juggling act.
Yeah. It's like learning to, continue to love and have compassion for that person, but sometimes you have to do it at a distance, right?
Yes. Yes. And I often, as I just said a minute ago, that love is accepting people where they are with room for who they may become. And that invariably some of you will say, does that mean I need to stay in relationship with my abusive mother? No. Accept them as they are, as she's abusive. This is how she is. That frees you then to say, I'm not going to come visit right now. If to accept them as they are doesn't bind you to them, it frees you from them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it makes total sense.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah. And to accept the church as it is to say, this is their agenda. This is what they're about. And I'm no thanks, So
we spent October, November, and December interviewing almost exclusively female people.
Females, yeah.
Yeah, we talked to them a lot about, we just hear their story, and a lot of them were from independent fundamentalist Baptist backgrounds and things like that. And they talked about their church trauma, but they all had a different story, and they all had things to say that we had never heard before. So we learned a lot. It was great. Had a great
I'll have to go
time.
back and listen.
You guys started talking about trauma to follow up on that in January. But I'm having trouble trying to ask this question. But I guess what I want to say is what role we come from backgrounds just like you, where women were silenced and they weren't allowed to lead. Even I think sometimes when they were, there were subtle things that hindered them and so on. So I'm still having trouble asking the question, what do you think the role of women in the near future is? And I'm thinking of Mama Bears, your titles and things like that.
Yeah.
What do you have to say around all that?
Yeah, I think men have had a fair shot. They've been, given an opportunity.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Right.
And it's our turn to really use our skills and make some things happen. I think, was it the Dalai Lama or somebody like that said, the world will be saved by Western women. And I kind of love that. Probably Western because they're more visible, have more voice only, not more wisdom. And I think we have got to listen to the feminine, and it starts with God, and viewing God as a male is so damaging. Even though the Hebrew Bible, which we call the New Testament, the Old Testament, talks about God as feminine also. And if you don't recognize that, well, no wonder we're just add-ons. We don't really even deserve to be here, women, because God is male after all. I just learned that the word, the they pronouns that we're using now as gender neutral, is, or singular pronouns, is how it always was. And Shakespeare used them. And then a little group of male linguists said he should be the default pronoun because men are better than women, and changed it. And so it became he. Well, just that is so exclusionary. And it's just one little very thin underlayment of the floor we walk on of women being viewed as dispensable, expendable. But until we get that worked out, I don't know how we can right this vessel. When we have just men calling the shots, because the masculine and the feminine in each one of us and in God is a balanced thing. And right brain, left brain, and all of that, it's all about balance. It's not about one dominating the other. All of that is a misread of Scripture, an abuse of Scripture.
Right.
So, girl power. That's our message here.
There you go.
Yeah.
One of the books that I wrote, we wrote the one book together, we're writing another one together, but I wrote several by myself. And the one I get the most praise for females is Being, because it's very vulnerable. It talks about my healing, my inner work, shadow work, and so on. But what's interesting to me about that is, it seems to me, and I may be wrong about the classification of this, but everybody wants to be brave or courageous, and we look at courage kind of and bravery as a kind of masculine thing. But Brene Brown says there's no bravery without vulnerability.
Yes.
And that if that is a feminine thing, then things like that are what changes the world. It's certainly what heals us. It's certainly what allows us to be brave, and so on. So I think what you said is very well said, that we got to find that, and we saw this kind of rush of the restless Reformed guys, running that show, and it was all about machoism and that false masculine kind of thing. It didn't accomplish anything noble. It didn't get us anywhere. No. It put us further behind. So definitely got to we have a chapter in that, the last book that we put out, called Finding Your Voice. And I thought it was, talking just about Laura's finding her voice, but it ended up, being partly about me. And,
yes.
and it all goes back to the masculine, feminine thing, that we need the whole thing. We need all of it.
Yeah.
Not just.
Yes. And that's a really good point, Carl, that this bondage of toxic masculinity is hurting men as much as women, just in different ways. But a man can't cry. He can't express vulnerability. It's funny you said we think of courage as a male attribute. I don't. I had to think about that for a second. But what I'm hearing you say is like that, running through a burning building or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Bravado. Yeah.
Bravado is masculine, but courage from the heart, working from the heart, vulnerability, that is very feminine, and it's masculine too when men can be deconstructed from their toxins they've been conditioned into. So we have so much to learn from each other. If we listen to each other and have compassion for each other, because we're all really trying to make it through, and there's enough for everybody if we share. That was kind of, I think, one of the big messages of the gospel is there is enough for everybody.
Right.
I'm not in competition to be a better Christian so that I can be sure I go to heaven, because there's no hell. No.
Yeah. I love what you said about, God embracing the feminine as much as the masculine. Part of my story is that, I have a dad that's absent. So of course that kind of skews your view of God. But, I just think there's so much truth in that. And just, I think that's a huge piece that is missing from the evangelical church, is that we really can't have that compassion and that heart for other people if we're not embracing the feminine part of the divine. I mean, it can't just be, we've seen what that has done, in our country, just that jogging type attitude. We need to embrace the feminine as well. And I think we're going to get so much farther down the road if we can do that.
And if we aren't sure about that, just imagine a world where all these babies, we're talking about our grandchildren, babies are born and it's all just men. There are no women, there are no mothers, just men. What would it look like? Might not have to use our imaginations too much to see.
Right.
Because we need that feminine, and we know that with babies and young children. Women can teach children at church, but we don't know that with men and adults, that we need the feminine fully incorporated, or whatever, inner freed in us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we didn't prepare you for most questions.
That's all right.
We kind of like to do it like that. But one of the questions I ask a lot of times is what if you had a billboard that everybody could see? What would you put on that billboard? And you're sure that everybody in the world will see it. What would be the sentence or phrase or motto or intention or whatever it is that you would like for everybody in the world to hear?
Well, our mission was changing the human conversation on love and inclusion. So that's in the back of my mind. I'm thinking a billboard that's a really good question. Might be something. Yeah. Like, we're all in this together. We really are, and we are interconnected.
Yeah.
And we need to work together.
That's very good.
I love that part, that we're all interconnected, because I think that is so true. I mean, I really do. And not only are we interconnected with one another, but we're interconnected with nature and just everything around us. That's beautiful. How can people get in touch with you if they're wanting to, I'm really hoping that this podcast reaches out to people like you were sharing with us at the beginning of the podcast that are feeling isolated and don't know where to turn or who to talk to, how can they get a hold of you?
Contact us or just go to our website, freedhearts.org, like hearts that have been freed, freedhearts.org. And you can connect with us there. You can find, you can ask to be in our online groups. We have groups for moms, groups for dads, and a group for LGBTQ. And it just is a way to connect with people and have community. And then we also have Beloved Adventure courses that are online, and they're very affordable. And if someone can't afford them, just let me know, and that's fine. But they're about overcoming dysfunction, journey beyond dysfunction. We have one on Harry Potter. We have one on, revitalizing the new you, like finding you, where it deals with healing the younger you and also talking to the older you. And that's in the first of the adventures. I forget the name of that one. But anyway, we have, and also Radically Included, all the verses that tell us we need to radically include, that not exclude. So there are in a parent's course. So anyway, there are lots of options. And then the podcast is there too. So there's stuff for everybody. On our resources page is just chock full of great information about, I don't know, everything, the clobber passages, the deconstruction, all the things that are on there. So all of it at freedhearts.org makes it easy.
Yeah, wow. Good. Susan Cottrell, ladies and gentlemen.
We're so thankful.
We need an applause. Yeah. We don't want an applause machine or something.
But so thankful for the work that you do, because, I mean, that it's kind of in one place that so many people can find healing and acceptance and inclusion and a place where they can
Thank you.
That's amazing work.
Thank you. Thank you. And not to be afraid of the journey. If you're just at the beginning of it, maybe you're a parent who just found out your child's gay, don't be afraid. If this is God whom you know and trust or hope to trust, don't be afraid to just take God's hand and walk the journey. If things fall apart around you, they weren't from God. God will not let you fall down a cliff. It's the stuff around you, the traditions of men, Jesus called it, that we give up the love of God, loving each other with the love of God in order to support traditions of men. And that's, what we want to let God deconstruct for us. So don't be afraid of that. And if you're LGBTQ, you are fantastic as you are. Don't be afraid that God doesn't love you or that this is not God's best for you. And God accepts you, but you can't have a relationship. All of that is traditions of men. It is not God speaking to you, sweetheart. Listen for God's sweet voice inside you that affirms you. And if it inspires fear, it's not God's voice. If it inspires love, it's God's voice, pure and simple. And every time the religious leaders brought someone to Jesus, like a dog bringing a bird on the porch and expecting a treat, Jesus turns to the person that brought them and corrects them vociferously. God never corrects the, quote, sinner that those religious leaders brought. And God is not here to correct you because you're some kind of sinner. That is not true. But God will correct the religious leaders who shun you and reject you and tell you that you're wrong. So you are on the right side of God's heart. If there's a division, you're on the right side of God's heart. You're on the side with Jesus. I promise you that. So take heart and let yourself move down this road and don't be afraid. There's nothing to be afraid of. God is humongous and created all this diversity. Look at all this diversity God created. Was that so that then you could hammer yourself into one little peg? Absolutely not.
No.
Right.
So that's it.
Yeah.
That's a great way to end.
Wonderful.
Thank you for being on the program. And if you're out there listening, we thank you for dropping in and listening to our conversation. I hope that you benefited from it and that you check out the resources. You can go to thedesertsanctuary.org and get all the show notes and everything from the show today, the ways to connect that we talked about. We want to remind you to be where you are, be who you are, and to also be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary. We hope you find who you are as you embark on your own journey.
For all of us here at the Desert Sanctuary, be who you are, be where you are, and be at peace.